In this video, I'm going to show how you can build a collaborative whiteboard app like Miro and do it all without writing a single line of code. You'll see here we've created a new board which we can rename something else, and then we can add in shapes, we can add in text elements, we can move stuff around, we can add sticky notes, and we can even upload images. So I'm going to show you how to build this. Before I get into that, I just wanted to mention that if you like this tutorial, but you don't want to actually go through the pain of building this app yourself, I've released this template on the Bubble Marketplace. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description. It's a free template, although you will have to pay for a plugin that makes the whiteboard possible. But now let's get into building the actual app. So I've created a brand new Bubble app with nothing on it at the moment. But before we get into building out any workflows, let's just take a look at the checklist of things we're going to need to go through to build our collaborative whiteboard app. You can see there's a list of steps here, and the very first step in our instructions is to set up the database. Now, thankfully, this is going to be a really simple database setup. You'll see at the moment, by default, we get the user data type, and we don't need to actually make any changes to this user data type. We do need to add in one more data type, and we're going to call that data type board. So let's create that. And then we need to add 3 custom fields to this board data type. The first thing is the ID, and this is the unique ID that each board is going to have. It's going to be a text element, and we're going to use it to reference boards we've already created, and we're also going to create a new one every time we create a new board. The next thing we're going to add is the owner field, and this is essentially the user that has created this specific whiteboard. So we're going to use the user data type for this. And now, because these are collaborative whiteboards, there's going to be the owner, who is the original creator of the whiteboard, but there's also going to be a list of members who are going to be other users who have access to this board. So let's go down to here and choose user once more. Now, importantly, you may have more than one user who is permitted to access a whiteboard. You might have a team of people working on a brainstorm. So we're going to make this field a list, and we're going to create that. And it's really that straightforward. With that, we can tick off the first step in our list of instructions. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the dashboard page. This is going to be the page where users create new whiteboards. So let's go down to our drop down and click on add new page. And we're going to call this dashboard. We're not going to clone it from any existing page. We have a blank app at the moment. And I'm just going to make a few quick changes here so it's easier to work with. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a column layout. And then I'm also going to change the width for the UI builder to 1200. That's typically the standard width I build in Bubble at the moment. Now we're going to want to create a mini dashboard here, and the idea is we're going to have a section here where we can create new boards and also look at the previous boards that we have created. But I'm just going to do some quick layout adjustments to this page. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a floating group menu on this left side of the board. So I'm going to grab a floating group. I'm going to drop it in here, and I'm also going to make this a column element. I'm going to untick the fixed width, but I do not want it taking up the full width of the dashboard page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a max width of 320 and a min width of 280. I'm going to untick this fit height to content, so it should take up the full scope of the page. Okay, so you can kind of understand where I'm coming with this. There's going to be a list of buttons here essentially that are going to trigger different actions. For our app, we're going to keep it pretty simple, and we're just going to put in 2 buttons here. The first one is going to be one that we're going to drop in here. We're going to call this button My Boards. We're going to detach this style, and then I'm going to make some quick changes and create a new style. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave the font at 15, but what I am going to do first of all is I'm going to center it. I'm going to undo the fixed width. I am going to set a fixed height on this, and I'm going to set it as 60. And then we're going to go back to the appearance. We'll leave the font as is, but what we are going to do is we're going to remove the background color, and then we're going to change the font there from white to this primary color that we already have saved down. This is looking a bit better. What I would like is if there was a bit of a gap around it. You can see the button is taking up the full width of the floating group at the moment, and I don't particularly like that. So I'm going to go back to my floating group, and I'm going to put a padding of 20 on each side of our floating group. That's a bit better again. I would also like some sort of separation between this button and the one lower down, because we are going to put two buttons here, as I mentioned. So we're going to copy that, we'll paste it, and we're just going to make this a simple log out button. So you can see that the formatting is a bit unusual because we have this kind of outset going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. You can see that's where that's coming from. Get rid of that. And we'll also get rid of that. And that is looking a lot better. I probably want these to be a bit further down. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add some padding to the very top. Let's go with 60 and see how that looks. Finally, I'm just going to left align the font on this to make it look a bit more natural. And there we can see we kind of have a skeleton layout of our dashboard. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop another group in the middle of this page here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to group and I'm going to drop this in here. You'll see straight away it's overlapping with the floating group. Now this is because it is a floating group. As the name suggests, it can float above or beneath other elements, but we don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a margin on this group here of 320. And you can see then it kind of perfectly aligns with the floating group and it won't overlap on it. And just thinking back again, I should probably set this to be a fixed width. So I'm going to set that there. If I didn't do that, then the issue would be, and we'll go back, 320 is what I should have had. If I didn't use a fixed width there, then as the page resizes, we might have seen a gap open up between the floating group and the main group here, which is not what we want. So I'm going to rename this group main container. Once again, I'm going to set it to a column. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, I'm using column groups when I'm building a bowl. I'm going to untick this, make this element a fixed width box, and we're going to set the min width of this group down to be 320. We're going to leave the max width as unlimited. In terms of fit height to content, we can get rid of that, and we should see then that it's going to take up the full page. Let's take a quick look at this on our preview and see how we're looking so far. Okay, we can see we have the beginnings of something here, but what I would like is it for it to be a bit clearer that we have a difference between the floating group on the left-hand side here and then the main group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a bit of a box shadow to the floating group. So let's go back to our main page, and if we go back to appearance, what we can do is we can say put this shadow style on the inset. We're going to make the color this black color, but we're only going to put it at 10% opacity, and we're only going to have it really on one side. And to achieve that, I'm just going to set the horizontal offset as -1 and then set everything else to 0. So it's not too obvious from this preview screen, but if we refresh our page here, you can see now we have this line that at least kind of shows there's a difference between the main group here and the floating group element over here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is just apply some padding to this main group container here. I'm going to apply a padding of 40 on each side of this container group. And then we're going to start dropping in elements to this group here. And what I'm visualizing for this is a table where we have all the existing boards that we have created, and then also a new board button that we can put up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a button first of all, and I'm going to change the style of this. Let's see how the outline button looks. Yeah, I think I prefer that. That said, I would like to make a bit of a change to it. So I'm going to go to edit style, and I'm going to set the roundness here to be more like 40. And I'd like to look at that a bit better. Let's go back to our design tab, and I'd like this to be at the top right hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that there. That isn't what we want. That's the one we want, the horizontal alignment on the button itself. And then we're going to call this button create board. So this is going to be the button the user presses to create a new board. So let's go and create a workflow. So let's click on this create board button and add a workflow. And you might remember in our database earlier, we created this data type called board and it has 3 different custom fields: the ID, the members, and the owner. So let's go to that workflow and let's create a new thing. The new thing we're going to create is going to be a board, and we're going to set those 3 fields. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an ID. And for this ID, we need to set a minimum length for it. I'll come on to why in a minute, but essentially what we need to do is we need to get a random 15 character string for each ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of Bubble's inbuilt functions. And if I go to calculate a formula, which I just got by typing in CAL, it came up then. You'll see here I can calculate one of 4 types of formulas. I can do a loan payment, a coordinates to address, generate random string, or calculate some product. In my case, I'm looking to generate a random string. I need to have at least 15 characters in this string. And then you have the options of using letters, non-capitalized letters, numbers, or special characters. I'm going to use a mixture of letters, non-capitalized letters, and also numbers. So hopefully now, whenever we create a new board, we should calculate a 15-digit string that is completely random. That'll be the unique identifier for each board. Now, there's 2 other fields we want to set here. The first one is the owner field, and this is the person creating the board. That's going to be whoever clicked on this create a board button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say current user. And then we also want to set the list of members who can access this board. So the way this is going to work is if you are a user who's in the list of members, you're going to be able to view the board, otherwise you will not. This is a list element, so at the moment there's going to be nobody in the list because we're just creating the board. But we do want to give our owner permission to view this board, so we're also going to add the current user to this list of members. Okay, so I'm going to preview this again now. What we'll see is when we click on create board, it doesn't look as though anything is happening, but what is actually happening in the background is we've created a board element. You can see here, this is the 15-digit string that is completely random and we're going to use to identify the board going forward. We do not have any members and we do not have any owner at the moment. And the reason is I'm not logged in. I haven't actually built the login functionality or sign up functionality. So I'm going to do that very quickly. Let's go to add a new page. And we're going to call this page sign up. We're not going to clone from anything. And I need to spend a bit of time formatting this. What I'm actually going to do for now is I'm just going to grab a component from the Bubble components library. You'll see here they have a bunch of sign up / login forms. So I'm going to grab this and drag it in here. And it's actually a pop-up. So maybe we don't want a pop-up. Maybe we actually want something on the page. Yeah, I think I prefer that one. So let's close that. And we should now have the ability to sign someone up. If we click to add workflow, you'll see here that while it does provide us with the various UI elements, we still need to sign up someone with an actual workflow. I don't really see a need to add a password twice, so I'm going to delete that. I'm just going to keep this a really simple password, so I'm going to delete that as well. So when that button is clicked, we're going to do a few things. We are going to sign the user up, and the email is going to be whatever value is in this field here, which is going to be the input sign up email. We're also going to have a password, which would be the input sign up password. And then we could build in like a name field where we take the user's name. I'm not going to do that for now, but certainly something you can do if you want. Once we sign that user up, we're going to reset the relevant inputs, which essentially is going to refresh all of these elements here. So your password and email aren't showing. Not that your actual password will be showing, but even the hidden characters, they will be removed. And then we're going to navigate them to the dashboard because that's where they're going to want to go after signing up. So let's do that quickly. I'm going to sign up as alex@cranfordtech.com. Really simple password. We'll sign up. And you can see here we're brought to the dashboard. Now, let's click on that create board button again and see what happens. So it doesn't look as though anything is happening on the actual app itself, but if we go into the database, what we will see is we now have two boards, and it looks as though it has assigned me to the original board. That's likely something to do with Bubble's cookie sessions, where they realize now that I'm the logged in user. I previously was the person that created that board. But if we look at the new board, and I'm going to delete the old one just to keep things simple, you'll see here, once again, we have our random 15-character string. We have our owner of the board, alex@cranfortech.com, and we also have members, which again, I'm a member of, just to ensure that I will have permission for the board going forward. Let's take a look at our checklist. What have we done? Well, we've created a dashboard page. It's not fully built out yet, so we're not going to need to move on to the next step for now, and then we're going to finish off this page later. And what we're going to need to do next is install the Advanced Whiteboard plugin. This is essentially a plugin that will give us extended functionality and allow us to add these collaborative whiteboards to our Bubble app. So let's go down here. Let's go to our plugins tab. Let's click on add plugins. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Advanced Whiteboard. You'll see here that it is a plugin developed by Cran4Tech, myself. It is a paid plugin. You can see full details of it on this page here. And I'm going to now subscribe to it, so I will have access to it. And once we subscribe to the Advanced Whiteboard plugin, what you should notice is you have access to this whiteboard element here. Now, before we use that, we need to do a couple of other things. You'll see that once the Advanced Whiteboard plugin has been installed, we need to register for a whiteboard.team account. Now, the reason we need to do this is the plugin itself is built on this really useful app, which is Whiteboard Team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and click on Start Whiteboarding. And you'll see here that we have access to the whiteboard. You know, we can put rectangles in, we can draw arrows from one to another, we can zoom out, we can zoom in, we can move stuff around. So this is the whiteboard functionality that we want to get into our Bubble app. Of course, the problem at the moment is this is on the whiteboard.team site. We don't yet have it in to our Bubble app. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in here and I'm going to sign up with a new account. Okay, and now that we're logged in as myself, you can see there we're reconnected. And if I click on my profile, and I can't really get it there. So if I actually go back to the whiteboard.team website and I click on my dashboard, what you'll see is I have a couple of boards here already. But if I go down to developers and I want to create an application, I need to click on this button here. And let's just call this app name bubble.io whiteboard app. I'm going to accept their developer terms, click save, and now I get this client ID and this client secret key. This is really important. I would not be exposing these to the public, but I am going to delete this account after this tutorial is completed. But in order to use our whiteboard plugin, we need to go to the plugin section again. We have it now installed. And you can see here, we have a number of fields that we need to fill out. We need to put in the client ID, both in live mode and in developer mode. For some apps, so for Stripe, for example, you'll often have test keys and actual development mode. Sorry, test keys and live mode keys. That is not the case here. We just have one client ID. So we're going to put it in to this field and also this field. And then as you can guess, we're putting in the secret key to the other two fields. Put that in there. And we'll put that in there. And that's all you need to do in terms of signing up for the whiteboard.team account and configuring the API keys. So what we can do is we can tick that off, and we have input the API keys. So this is where we're getting to the meat of the tutorial. We now want to create the board page. This is where the whiteboard itself is going to be shown and where users can collaborate on that whiteboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Bubble app. I'm going to go back to my dashboard and I'm going to add a workflow to this create board button. But just before I do, I'm going to create a new page. I'm going to call this page name board. We're not going to clone it from anything. Now I want to send some data to this page. If we go back to our dashboard page and have a look at this workflow here, we're going to be creating the board. We're then going to send the user to the board page. But importantly, what we're going to do is we want to be able to tell Bubble that we're sending the data for the whiteboard we just created. So what we're going to do is we're going to send more parameters to the page. The parameter we're going to send, we're going to give it the key of board. And the board we're going to send is the result of step 1, the ID we're creating there. So what I'm doing is I'm sending the ID, which is this field here, of the board that we've created in step 1, sending it to the board page. And what's important is if we're sending it as a parameter, what's going to happen, it's going to be up in the URL here, which in turn is going to allow us to identify that board. This sounds a bit complex. I'm going to show you exactly how it works just now. So if we click on that again, and this time if we click on the create board button, you can see we're being sent to a new blank page. It's the board page that we just created. But importantly, you'll see here we have this parameter in the URL that says board. And if we look at this ID, it starts off with XVX. And if we go into our database, you'll see the most recent board we created. It has XVX. So we're taking this ID and we're sending it to the page via that URL parameter. We're going to use this to identify the board we just created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the board page. And like I said earlier, because we have installed the Advanced Whiteboard plugin, we now have access to this whiteboard element. Okay, so you can see here there's a number of fields that we need to fill out. The first thing I'm going to do is actually just set some layout on the page itself. As I said, 1200 is typically the height I build in. And we're going to put in some margins here as well. We might actually drop a group in and then put the whiteboard element in that. So I'm just going to cut that, go back up to our group and paste that in there. We can set that as a column and then we'll go about setting our widths. Typically put the min width as 300. We'll put the min height on this as 500. We're going to put this in the middle of that group. And then finally, we're going to apply some paddings to this group. So we'll put 40, 40, 40, and 40. We'll allow this to take up the full width of the group it's in. And we're also going to set a min height on this as maybe 450. And that looks okay. Okay, so now we have a bunch of fields that we need to fill out here. And if we look at the documentation associated with board ID, this is probably the most crucial field of the entire setup. It says you can load previously saved boards and create new boards using the board ID. It must be a unique string of at least 15 characters. So this is why we use that calculate random string function earlier. We have to have a random 15 digits in here. Now, what we can do is we could just put in 15 random digits. So let me just type in, a bunch of random digits. And then I'm going to come back to this in a second, but just for now, I'm going to put in current user's email. So let's preview this page. And you can see here we have our whiteboard loading. It's not quite as big as I'd like, but it's working out fine. And I'm going to drop a rectangle in the middle of it. So let's just assume for argument's sake that's the only thing that we want to do to the board. And it seems to be working fine, but I want to make this page dynamic. At the moment, every time I reload this page, it's going to be this board with the rectangle in it that's going to be loaded. Whereas what I want is I want to be able to navigate from the dashboard page, which is back here, and send a different board to this page every time. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to somehow pull the URL parameter that we created previously and pull that into the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my board. And instead of putting in a static 15 character string here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to get data from page URL. And the parameter name that I want to get is board. And that's all I need to do. Now, when I go back to my dashboard page, what I should see is when I create a new board, we're once again going to navigate to this page. I have this unique ID up here. And if I change the name of this board to be my test board, leave that down, and then copy that address. And then if I go back to my dashboard once again, We can access that board at any time in any place by just putting in the URL there. You can see there my test board is coming through. So that is how you dynamically send data to the board page and ensure that you get the board you want every single time. We nearly have our board page built out. There's a few more things we want to put in. So for example, we have loaded a whiteboard on the page, but we want to be able to invite colleagues to collaborate on the same whiteboard with us. And we also want to be able to clear a whiteboard. But let's finish off our dashboard page now, because we can now do that as we've finished building the initial stages of the board page. In our dashboard, what I want to do here is I want to drop in something that will let us see all the previously created boards we've been involved in. So let's click on the table element down here. This is a relatively new element created by Bubble. I really like it. It's currently in beta, so it may change a bit by the time you're watching this video, but it's really useful, I think. The type of content in this table is going to be a board. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a search for all boards, and then we're going to put in a constraint. We don't want every single board that has ever been created on our app to be in here. You might have a board created by another company, another team that you don't have access to. So in order to constrain the boards in the table to just be ones that we are allowed to see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say members contains current user. You might remember back on our boards database area that we have this members field, and you'll see here Alex at cranfordtech.com. He is a member of this particular board, so we should have access to it. Let's drop in some elements here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a text element. I'm going to reset this to be a column, put in some padding on the various sides, align it, and then we're going to give this board ID, and we'll make it bold. And then we're going to copy the cell content, paste it in there. Unfortunately, we do have to do the layout again, so let's just make that column, put in our 12s, and we're going to call this one, in fact, we're actually just going to change that. Let's do the same here. And we're going to call this one owner. So who is the user that has created this board? And then finally, in the third column, we're going to say, and again, we'll just do our quick formatting. We're just going to say in this one, created on. Okay, so these are the three pieces of information that we're going to want. Then I'm going to copy this cell here. And if we paste that there, we don't need to actually do that. Copy the text element, I should have said. And again, we'll change this to column. Put it in the center. 12, 12, 12, 12. Paste in our text element. We're going to unbold it. And then we're going to say insert dynamic data. And it's going to be the current rows boards ID. That's simple. The owner, as you'd imagine, is going to be quite similar. Paste that in there. And instead of having the board ID, we're just going to have current board's owner email. So we'll identify them by their email address. And then finally, we will set this, paste in one more. And this time, instead of ID or owner, we're going to have creation date. And we're going to format it as, let's go with that kind of formatting. Okay, let's refresh our dashboard page and see how that looks. And you can see there we have 3 boards that Alex at cranfordtech.com is a member of. You can see they've all been created on the 29th of August, which is today's date. So this is good. We can now see the boards that we've previously created. Just one small thing I want to change on this because it's kind of bugging me. If we go back to section here, I like this formatting, but I also want to put it on the outside of the entire board. So let's go to border style. We'll make that solid. And we'll put that in there as well. And then we're also going to make that board a bit bigger. And do that. Min width of 300. And we'll say a min height of 250. Okay, so Let's just take a quick look at that. Okay, great. So we've accessed all the boards we previously created, but let's say we want to access them. How would we do that? So what we would do is we need to put in a workflow that's essentially going to go back to that dynamic board page we've created, but this time send this board's ID. So it's quite straightforward. All we need to do is, and one limitation actually I've noticed of the table elements is that you can't set a workflow for clicking on a specific cell. So what you need to do is you need to ensure that the text element takes up the full width and height of the cell and then set the workflow on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that fit height to content, and then I'm going to put this text element as center the text vertically. And then what I can do is on this text element, I can add a workflow. And I'm saying when the current row's board is clicked, I'm going to go to page board. And again, much like we did for creating the board in the first place, we're sending the board's ID as a parameter. So let's go here and go to send more parameters to the page. The key once again is going to be board, and the actual value we're sending is going to be the current row's board's ID. So hopefully now when we click on this element here, you'll see here we have the option. We're going to be sent to the board page, and this time this is going to be the board ID that'll be sent there. Okay, so you can see that has indeed gone through, but just in order to see that this works fully, what we're going to do is we're going to change the name of this board to, let's call it Marketing Ideas. And let's drop in a sticky note. In fact, let's not go to sticky note, let's go to rectangle this time. And we'll drop in a text element here and say ideas for marketing. Put this up here. And then we'll copy it, we'll paste it, and we'll say brand promotion and influencer videos. Okay, so now that we've saved this down as marketing ideas, I want us to be able to access this board again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the dashboard page. And hopefully now when I click on this board ID, we're once again going to be sent to the board page, but this time we're going to see those things we create on the whiteboard still be there. So let's click on that. It's loading, and yeah, you can see that's worked as we hoped. It's kind of annoying actually navigating from the board page to the dashboard every 2 seconds. So let's put in a quick link element on that. If we go back to board, you can see at the moment I don't have any kind of nav bar set, which I really should. In the interest of speed, I'm just going to take one from the bubble pre-built components. So let's drag this element up here. In fact, we'll drag it on the page first, and then we'll put it at the very start. And I don't really need all this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that. I'm also going to delete the bubble logo. I will set this at the right hand side. And then instead of having a login sign up, I'm just going to have this as dashboard. And we can navigate to the dashboard page. So we should be able to flick back and forth pretty easily. Click on dashboard, we're brought back here. And then we can click on the board ID again. Now, you may think that the board ID isn't necessarily the best way to identify the board. I mean, we do have this name here, and marketing ideas seems like a lot better way to identify which board we're looking at compared to the board ID. And I would agree with that. So what we're going to do is instead of having the board ID there, we're going to change that to the board name. And again, you might think it should be pretty straightforward that we just grab the name from the board that we created, which would be this one here, and set that. Unfortunately, the plugin, because it's built on the whiteboard.team, we just got to do a bit more work, but nothing too difficult. What we're going to do is instead of getting data from our database for this field, what we're going to do is we're going to click on Insert Dynamic Data. We're going to get data from an external API. The API is going to be whiteboard details, get board details. And you'll see here we need to put in a board ID. And again, we already have that saved down. It's the random 15 character string that we've previously created. So I'm going to say current rows board ID. And then once we have that in, you should see we have access to a number of different data fields here. We have the ID, which we already have. We have the name, which we do not already have. And we also have a couple of other things. Let's go with name for now and refresh our page. And now when we click on dashboard, we should see the name of the board being loaded in here. You can see there's a small bit of a lag. This is the API getting the data. What you could do is put a loader screen over this for a couple of seconds as it's pulling in the name. So now that we're loading in the board name, let's take a look back at our checklist. We have created the dashboard page and we're nearly finished it. We can access previously created whiteboards. Now, one thing we want to do is to be able to delete previously created whiteboards. So I think once we've achieved this part of it, we can tick off this and also create the dashboard page. So this is a relatively simple one. All you're going to need to do is go into your design tab and we're going to add in one more column. So if we click on the plus sign here on the table and then we drag this over to the right hand side, what we can do is we can put something in here and we can say delete board. We'll just change this container layer to be a column, put it once more in the center. We'll say when this button is clicked, we are going to delete a thing, and the thing we're deleting is the current rows board. So you'll see when we click on this, it's going to delete the board immediately. What I sometimes do is instead of having just a one-click action to delete the board, I might show a pop-up on the button and then have a "Are you sure?" question pop up, just because it can be good to double check that people did actually intend to delete the board. I'm not going to do that now, but just food for thought. So let's just make sure this works. Okay, and we can see now we're down to one board, so we can delete our boards as we liked. Let's tick that off the checklist. And the last thing we need to be able to do is back on the board page, we need to do two things. We need to be able to invite colleagues to collaborate on the same whiteboard, and we also need to be able to clear a whiteboard. Let's tackle the inviting colleagues to collaborate on the same whiteboard first of all. So let's go back to our board page and let's take a look at this. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. So let's go down. I'm going to set the min height on this to be 750. And then if we go back to our dashboard, then just go over to that board page. Let's just make sure it's looking okay. And I like that. I think there's more space on it. Just so you know yourself, you can make this take up the full screen just by clicking this full screen button here. So let's say we're on this marketing ideas whiteboard and we want to invite a colleague to it. What we can do is we can put in a button up here and we can say invite colleagues, or colleague for now, let's say. And we're going to make this a fixed width of 170 maybe. And we're going to put a bit of a margin on the bottom of it just to give it a bit of space before the whiteboard itself. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pop-up when this button is clicked. So I'm going to grab the pop-up element. And this is going to be from where we will invite our colleagues. So let's change this to be a column. Let's not make it a fixed width. Let's put it as 300 min and then a max of 700. We're going to put some padding on this pop-up. And then we're just going to put in a few text elements. The first thing we're going to say is just a header here. And I'm going to call it invite a colleague. We'll change the style of this to be maybe heading 4. Get rid of the fixed width and the min height there. And then we're going to say enter an email in the input box below and click invite to invite a colleague to work on this whiteboard. So the idea is we're going to have an input field, and I'll just quickly format this. And then we're going to allow users to put in their colleague's email into the input field. We'll click invite. They'll get an email with a link to this particular whiteboard. So let's add in that input field. Put that in there. And there's not going to be any initial content. We'll put in a placeholder just so it's obvious that it is an email that's supposed to go in there. We'll change the format to email. Put the margins on top to be 40 again. Probably don't need that much space on this one. So they'll put their email in here, and then we'll put in another button as well. Let's grab our button element, put that in there. Invite, margin on top of 20. So what's going to happen when we click on the invite button is we are going to send an email. So we're going to send an email to whatever value is in the input box. The sender name is going to be the current user's email. The subject is going to be join my whiteboard. And then in the body we can say, hi there, you've been invited to join my whiteboard. You can access it at the link below. You can of course put whatever wording you want in here. And then what we're going to do is we want to send the colleague a URL that matches this one here. So how do we do that? It's actually quite simple. All we need to do is we want to put in insert dynamic data, and we're going to search for this URL. That's going to take the URL of the page that the user is already on and then send it to them. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, but we do need to do a couple of other things. So first of all, we haven't actually triggered the pop-up yet. So let's refresh this page and we'll take a look. You can see at the moment when I'm clicking this invite colleague button, nothing's happening. So what we need to do is we need to, on that button click, show the pop-up. So let's add a workflow to that. We're going to show an element, and the element we're going to show is pop-up A. You can see that's working. And let's just type in a dummy email address first of all. And once we click invite, that email has gone to that address, which is of course a fake address. But you'll see the pop-up is still here, the email address is still there. Not great from a UI perspective. So what we're going to do is once that button is clicked, we're going to reset the relevant inputs, and we're also going to hide an element, and the element is going to be the pop-up. Let's try that one more time. Click invite, send the email, and it's gone. Okay, that's working fine, but now we need to make sure that our colleague is actually receiving that email and that they can access the whiteboard. So to do that, I'm going to set up a temporary email address. And to do that, I'm going to use this website, tempmail.org. It essentially gives you a very temporary email inbox. You can see here that it's empty at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this email address. And in the send email, I'm going to use that in the input, and we're going to send it here. So let's invite that colleague. This is their email address. We'll invite them. And let's wait here. Scroll down, and you can see that this has come from alex@cranfordtech.com. Click on that. And you can see here they've been given the URL. I believe on some email inboxes, this is actually going to be a clickable, URL link. I think just because we're using this tempmail.org, it's not going to be working, but we can copy this and we can paste it in, and we get back to the marketing ideas board. Now, I'm still logged in as alex@cranfordtech.com. So I can access this board because I created it, but in reality, I should have been logged in as this particular user here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log alex@cranfordtech.com out. We can do that by going back to our dashboard, clicking on design, and we can just log the user out using this button. let's say log the user out, and then we'll navigate them to the sign up page. So let's log Alex out, get out of that, log out, and then what we'll do is we'll sign this user up here. So I'm not sure if I've hooked up the workflow for this. Let's just take a quick look. Sign up. Okay, I have. So we'll put in email, which is here, and we'll just put in the test password. Sign that user up. We should see that this user doesn't currently have any access to any whiteboards whatsoever. And what you might want to do is when they don't have any whiteboards that they can access, you might want to hide this particular table here. So you could say when current users, you should do when do a search for boards where members contains current users count is 0. So when the current user is not a member of any board, hide this element. So we'll untick that, and then you can collapse it when it's true. And what you can also do is add in a text element and say to add your first board, click on the create board button. And then you can only show this one when the inverse condition is true. So if we take the condition that's on this, paste this in here and say when the count is greater than 0, then you're going to not show this. So let's refresh. Again, I should see this table vanish. And yeah, you can see there to add your first board, click on the create button. I also don't like how big this cell is here, or this row I should say. So we're going to make this row a fixed height. I think we're also going to do the same for the other ones. Okay, we're logged in as this user here, and we've been invited to join that whiteboard, but we don't have any way of accessing this yet from the dashboard. So what I'm going to suggest we do is when we go to this URL, we put in some sort of condition that allows us to be added to the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on the page load, we're going to make changes to a thing. The thing we're going to change is the current page's board. We don't actually have access to that particular expression, but what we can do is we can do a search for a board. We can search for the first item where the unique ID, or where the ID I should say, is equal to whatever's in the page URL. And it's the board parameter again. What we're going to do is we are going to change the list of members. We're going to add the current user. So now whenever we load up this URL and we're logged in as our demo user, let's just make sure we are indeed run as them. So when this page reloads, it's not working because we're not loading on the board. But if we get this email and we're logged in, and we put it in there, we should now see that when we go to the dashboard, so there's a zoom feature there, we should now see when we go to the dashboard that this board is available to us. Just going to fix the formatting on that there. Set that table, the layout. We don't need to have a min height there at all. Refresh that. On that particular page, refresh this. And that looks better. So that's how you would invite people to individual boards. What you'll see is if you go back into our database for that particular board there, the owner is still alex@cranfordtech.com, but the members are different. And then just the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this looks when there's two people working on the board at the same time. So we're now logged in as our test user, and they have access to this board. And what we can do is if we open up another window, which I'm going to do just in the background here. So I have two windows open here. You can see on Chrome, I'm logged in as our demo user. Whereas I'll go over to Safari, I'm logged in as alex@cranfordtech.com. And what you can do is you can add things like a sticky note, for example, on one. And when you click away, it automatically appears on the other. This person then could add a text element to that. And again, once they click away, it appears on the other one. So that's how you make these whiteboards collaborative. You invite people to the same board and they can work at the same time. And there is actually one more thing that we need to do. Let's go back to our checklist. We now have the ability to invite colleagues to collaborate on the same whiteboard. And we have one final action that we want to go through, and that's how you clear a whiteboard. Now, you could quite easily click on something and click on the little trash button here, and that would get rid of it. But a quicker way you can do that, if you would like to do so, and if you have a big board you want to clear all at once, is let's just drop one more button onto our board page. So if we go onto that, in fact, let's even copy this button and move it up one. And instead of saying invite colleague, let's do clear board. Let's add a workflow. And if we go to element actions and go to clear a whiteboard, you can see here that it's clearing element whiteboard A. Because there's only one whiteboard on this page, this is the relevant one. So if you have multiple whiteboards on a page, you might have a list of whiteboard A, B, and C, etc. But if we refresh our page and then we click on the clear board button, you can see there the whiteboard, everything vanishes. Again, you may want to put up a pop-up and just have a kind of confirmation command where it says, are you sure you want to clear this board? But that's how you'd implement that. So that's it for this tutorial. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have actually created a template for a fully built out version of this app. You can see here the dashboard is fully built out. It's nice and responsive. So if you would like to get this template, I'm going to link to it down in the description.